Welcome everyone to a new episode. It is September 15th. We are in the middle of September, coming to the end of Q3. Boom. And business is back. I got to tell you, after kind of a slow July, August, and when I say slow, I don't mean like it was slow in business. It was across the board, somewhat of a slowdown in marketing activity, business development, conversations with customers, right?
We knew our customers wanted to go on vacation. We knew our prospects wanted to go on vacation. Everybody wanted to take some time to
Amen to that.
Get a little R&R, and we did as well.
I was so happy for that.
So we slowed down on the pipeline, but even if we wanted to slow the pipeline down right now, I don't think we could.
No, we couldn't. Some of which is probably just industry, economic forces, people coming back from vacation. Part of it is also a big push and effort that we've put into revops over the last year and a half. Today's main topic is for our friends in the public accounting world, CAS, Finance as a Service. Kind of want to share a little bit about our story and how we see revenue operations being key. We always talk about in our business, like our three core competencies. At least in our business, we view it as financial management, because at the end of the day, that is what we do for our customers. So we got to be pretty damn good at the accounting and the FP&A and tax stuff. Second, we talk about people and the team. As much as we throw technology and standard operating procedures and workflow, at the end of the day, this is still very much a people business. And we are personally on target to hit 30 team members by the end of this year, which is very exciting. And
big milestone, big change.
Milestone. What do they say? Like after 10, it changes things? I'd say, my God, like right now, I'm feeling like...
You go through a change when you kind of go over 10, right? And then you go through a change somewhere between 25 and 40 people. And for us, that is now.
Yeah,
but we
even when you find a business partner, that was a big change too, because then I got to deal with your ass, not just the business. The third piece is digital marketing, and we consider that a core competency here because we identified easily, I would say 2 years ago, that was probably even longer, but we did bring a local company to help us better understand the piping under the digital marketing foundation, which is very critical. It's like building a house on a foundation, but none of the piping is in there, so the water, the electricity doesn't really move. So those three are very much core competencies of ours, and what we want to do is kind of share with some of our friends in our industry, and you can probably use this in other service-based industries and manufacturing, our view of what RevOps is and the importance of RevOps. So even though digital marketing for us is very much a core competency, what comes after that is actually just as important, but it tends to be more strategic, surgical placement of capability and capacity.
And it tends to be, the stuff that comes after that tends to be things that service-based businesses are generally a little more inherently better at, because they are either selling. So RevOps, we've been touching on RevOps for the last 4 or 5 weeks, starting with digital marketing and how that has to be a core competency for service-based businesses. But RevOps is really your sales, marketing and sales. I'll start with marketing. Marketing, first bucket. Sales is the second bucket. And customer success, keeping your customers happy, third bucket. That is revenue operations as we've defined it. And, I think service-based firms, accounting firms in particular, tend to be good at the sales and the customer success, because it generally has historically been at the partner level, right? It's up to the partner to drive the business. It's up to the partner to keep the business happy, keep the customer happy. But it's that first part that called digital marketing, because there's not a whole lot of other marketing going on right now.
Right.
Service-based firms tend to not be good at, because they have historically leveraged their networks, other channel partners, to drive business.
Yeah. So the key to RevOps is all about leverage, and leverage on the marketing, on the sales, customer success. But before we go there, middle of September, closing out Q3, some of the things we need to be thinking about. Sure, we're probably in the midst of reviewing August numbers, August versus plan, August versus last year's August, August versus July. Kind of get a sense of everything from inbound bookings, revenue, even pricing. We're in the midst of like a little bit of an inflation, I heard. Is your pricing actually reflecting that? Cost of goods sold, again, a little bit of inflation. Is that starting to trickle in and deteriorating gross margins if you're not able to offset that with revenue? But as we're coming into the end of September, we are in the middle of planning season once again, but this tends to be more longer range planning. So we're working with customers around their 3 to 5 year plan, not so much next year's annual operating plan. And so it's kind of critical, like all this economic news and some of the volatility, if you will, really has to come into play as you're thinking about some of your planning. I would say I'd probably be de-emphasizing some of this chaotic sort of headline news that we're hearing and seeing today and putting that towards your long-range plan. It's probably going to affect more your 2022 annual operating plan and probably going to affect sort of how the next 4 months or next 3.5 months kind of pan out. But that said, as we're going through the long-range planning, and of course, big fans of Giraffe, right? Big plug there, are thinking about things like trajectory. So we went through the whole GDP, the planning, what are your 5-year goals, your 1-year goal, what are those metrics, processes, things that you need to do to achieve the latter, and who's actually going to do that. And by the way, if you don't have somebody to do that, you probably need to throw into your 2022 plan somebody to go do that. And then, of course, the last piece on the long-range planning is thinking about the liquidity, right? All of this requires capital, and if your business isn't throwing off enough free cash flow, then you need to go out and raise that capital. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of some of the long-range planning. Steve, from your perspective, some of the noise, let's call it noise, some of the volatile news that we're hearing, what are the things that are having the greatest impact on planning? Is it capital, access to capital? Is it inflation, scarcity?
Yeah, right now, not really tied to the headlines, but just in our customers. So some of our customer stories, it is like accessing that capital. Very different businesses, very different reasons, but they're looking for capital to grow. Some of them are consumer product goods that are just like they're taking off and they need working capital. Others are getting started, need that startup capital to really leverage what they've planned and how they're going to actually execute on those plans. So
it definitely, without a doubt, especially in the startup world, you're seeing plenty of venture capital out there. So companies are raising at higher and higher valuations and multiples, and even just access. Like when I was talking to a VC yesterday, and he's telling me, "Oh yeah, we are a seed," and he's East Coast, so we invest in seed rounds and Series A. And I said, "Okay, so what's your minimum check for a seed?" He said, "Oh, it's usually $1.5 to $2 million." I was like, "Holy shit!" Right? 3-4 years ago, a seed round, you're lucky to like pull off $500,000. But why is that important? Because as you're thinking about your 5-year plan, you're obviously not going to be raising all that capital today. You end up raising 3-4 tranches of capital based on your trajectory, but more importantly, sort of, what do I get for that capital? What's that line in the sand? What's my goal?
Yeah, and most companies, most investors will tell you want to raise for 12 to 18 months, right? If you're raising more than that, then you're selling too much to the company because you're raising at a lower valuation. You're going to hit other milestones between the next 12 to 18 months where you're going to be able to raise your valuation and dramatically and be able to sell stock more efficiently.
Right. So the key to this sort of pivot here in our conversation is as we're entering long-range planning mode, which we're going to be talking more about that in October, some of the noise we're hearing and seeing in the news is probably not going to impact your long-range plan. Not to say that, 3 years, 4 years from now, as all of this stimulus and liquidity begins to dry up, maybe cost of capital goes up, like could that have another black swan effect on the economy and therefore your plan? It could, and we're thinking about that, right? We've got ambitious plans over the next 2 to 3 years, and I'm very acutely aware, like if liquidity were to dry up, economic activity were to slow, how would that impact our planning? The good news is, we're usually having to plan 6 months out because we don't have machines here. So in the world of public accounting, we don't have machines. We have to go out and recruit, and if you're smart about it and have some sort of forward-thinking view on your strategy, you have to be hiring today for tomorrow's customers.
I think some of the headlines out there that we're seeing is kind of good news on the planning front is GDP basically on track by the end of the year to be back to not just pre-pandemic levels, but pre-pandemic expectations for the end of 2021. So, the trajectory, prior to the pandemic for the end of 2021 versus the trajectory right now of getting to the end of 2021, we're going to be at par from where we would have expected to be now without the pandemic.
And that is pretty impressive, right? And then to boot or to throw on top of that, you have a lot of stimulus, federal stimulus, that was ultimately, much of it was earmarked towards the states to make up for some of their deficit spending through the pandemic, but many of those states really didn't need it. And there was a study that came out last week, I believe, that even with PPP loans, the employers that received it, chances are, even without the PPP, 90% of the employees would have still have been employed without the PPP. What does that mean? It just really means that at the bottom of your balance sheet, that thing down there, the equity piece that no one ever looks at, it just means you've got an extra few months of payroll booked on your balance sheet as equity, as cushion, and is probably, hopefully, still in your bank account if you haven't used it. So the good news is we're back on track with the GDP. The uncertainty is, are the valuations we're seeing, not just in the startup world, is this an asset bubble? Are valuations kind of a little frothy? And maybe they are, maybe they're not. If GDP does go beyond and economic activity does go above original plans, it means asset prices are well priced. And so that's the good news. The other thing that came out this week, and I believe it was definitely in the Wall Street Journal, and the title of the article was How the U.S. Actually Nailed It with the Economic Response to COVID. Mm-hmm. To me, that was impressive.
Yeah, it's a look back into all that happened, and there was a lot of debate, a lot of controversy, a lot of chaos, whether that was brought by PPP or person in office. There was a lot of chaos and a lot of commentary. But looking back at it, some of the numbers, like I think one of the numbers you highlighted earlier in our conversation was poverty. Like the poverty level is up if you just look at numbers, but if you factor in some of the stimulus, some of the
stamps,
things of that nature, poverty is actually down, right? Like if you just take W-2 earnings, it's up, but if you take the other pieces of the stimulus, it's down, which means that been a factor in pushing us back to a good place.
Yeah, agreed. So pre-pandemic, poverty was sort of floating around that 11, 12%, and after the pandemic or post-pandemic, with all the stimulus, the unemployment benefits, or the poverty level, instead of being at, I think it should have been more closer to 12, 13%, but if you net the upside effect of all that stimulus, it was in that 9.5%.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's like probably one of the first times that's ever happened in the midst of a recession. Never mind a recession that totally blindsided everyone, because who the hell knew we were just going to shut down, right? So there's no preparation.
I think there's going to be a lot learned from this, like for future recession, future events, and hopefully we can do it even better next time. But
isn't that always the case? Like everybody's a lemming, right? When the stock market's going up and Bitcoin's going up, you throw more money at it, as opposed to when it's going in the opposite direction. That's really when you should open up your wallet and throw capital at it.
On the downside, the debt is up to about 100% of GDP, which is a
the deficit.
Material change.
It is. Not the deficit, but yes, you're right. The debt that's held by citizens. It's probably not going to change for a while. I mean, you look at some of the infrastructure spending, some of the bills that are out there right now in Congress. Yes, there was a big announcement this week around readjusting the whole tax rates for corporations, businesses. I mean, that's going to be very interesting. That's going to take a while to work itself out, I hope. Without a doubt, we all knew that tax rates have been at pretty, I won't say historical lows, but definitely cyclical lows. It was inevitable, especially with the change in administration, that we were going to see a bounce back. Hopefully it's not going to be too much that with the impact of inflation and a softening economy, China, it's not going to have a brute force impact on the economy.
Yeah.
So as you're talking to your customers, as you're being that trusted advisor, these are kind of the things that you should be thinking about. It's not just large Fortune 100 companies that should really care about micro, macro economic activity. It is important to understand your customers' inputs to the business, whether it is people, marketing spend, raw materials. It's important to understand what are those drivers that can have the greatest impact on your customers' gross margins. And then ultimately, second piece would be understanding the trajectory of that company and the expanding and scaling of the OpEx to make sure that that company is meeting its free cash flow margins or has enough capital to offset the cash flow needs of the business. And so with that, Steve, let's bounce back to the topic of today, which is for us, it's a very exciting topic. We're very passionate about RevOps. I mean, let's face it, when you start a practice, when you start a firm, when you start a business, you are the number one salesperson. If you don't like to do sales, forget it. Don't start a business, right? Entrepreneurial is like the number one skill set is selling.
And you think about like how do most businesses start in the service world, right? Whether you're maybe not doctors, lawyers, CPAs, lawn care, like tons of stuff. The way they get started is somebody learns the skills, and then you take them on your own, or you join somebody else. But you are taking skills and setting up a new business. And what do? You might take a customer or two with you. They might be loyal to you, but you are the one that's doing the work, right? You're the one that's making it happen. That's the customer success part, right? And then you're responsible for making sure that when one customer leaves, you have another one to fill the void. And if you want to grow, you have more than positive growth. So those two things in the RevOps, I think, come more naturally to.
Right, but not every hammer swinger is going to be a general contractor, because you have to know how to sell. So forget about marketing for a second, and definitely forget about digital marketing.
Sure, for sure.
Just because you're a bean counter and you know how to do debits and credits, or you're a hammer swinger, or you're a plumber, or you're a landscaper, you know how to ride a mower, that doesn't mean you're going to be an entrepreneur. So I would say, okay, I agree with you. The number one skill of most entrepreneurs is you got to know the platform, the service, you got to know how to do it. The second most important is having the attitude to be able to sell. So that's how you get up to bat, right?
Yeah, when you have a lead and you're able to sell, you can get a new customer.
Right. Now,
but getting that lead is where you're going next.
That's where we're going next.
Which is the big fail point for so many. And sometimes you don't realize it's a fail point because you have enough leads. You have enough leads from your current referral sources, current ways of getting business.
So how do you get leads? How do you do it?
So when we first started out, like it was network, right? It was going to events, going to networking events. It was developing other professional service partners, friends who.
And what's wrong with that strategy?
It's a great strategy, but show me who's been successful with that strategy in person elbow, over the last 18 months. It just hasn't been there. It's coming back, but it hasn't been there. So if you didn't have those, if you didn't have a reputation, if you didn't have those partners that are referring business to you before the pandemic hit, you probably did not, develop those in the midst of it. Now we did develop new relationships in the midst of it, but that was because we had to put these skills together in the first place. And I'd argue that our digital marketing, which we had started before the pandemic, but which really doubled down at the start of the pandemic, that was for us the differentiator and the key that helped us to be able to continue filling the pipeline.
So for hundreds of years, business has always been local, so maybe that's the first opportunity to think about. Today, business doesn't have to be local. So there is no geographic constraint. The internet's been around for 25 years. Why hasn't this happened before? Why are we talking about one-to-many today? And why haven't public accounting, why haven't bookkeepers, why haven't fractional CFOs? I think I know why. I think it's because rubbing elbows just kind of works, and it's human nature, and people enjoy the interaction. So there's really nothing wrong with networking and the referral component of your marketing strategy. It's just you're not going to go from 1 to 60 or 1 to 100 overnight. Not that you will either with digital marketing, right? Because that shit takes like 3-4 years.
I'm going to try to take it to a little bit different level. It might get a little complicated for our listeners, but part of it is, what are you selling, right? Because when you're selling your own services, you only can sell a certain amount, right? You have limited capacity. Once you hire 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, usually you're doing that because your efforts have been successful and you need more capacity, right? But the other aspect, which we'll talk about, I believe, more next week, is on the people side. What are you actually selling, right? And the other thing that we're passionate about digital marketing, but we're passionate about FP&A, right? Financial planning and analysis. That is like the product that we want to be selling. In the industry right now, like everybody's talking about CAS, consulting and advisory services, or client accounting services. CAS is the way to go. We like to term it as finance as a service, FP&A as a service, because we're able to leverage that. So if you're selling,
and why is that important?
The terminology?
Yeah, why is it important that it's that you're selling versus time or the? practice owner?
Because if I'm doing the old school marketing, driving leads through the network, I can probably deliver enough to keep me busy, keep 2 or 3 people busy.
And you're only selling you.
And we're only selling you or
That's the
time,
key
right?
here, guys.
It's when we're selling a product, when you can productize what the customer is getting, right? And CFO, FP&A, it's all that forward-looking stuff, right? And one of the biggest challenges in the accounting business, I feel, is we're built on that backward-looking. Compliance, bookkeeping, that is your foundation of which you can launch into the future, right? And when you're talking about that future planning, you're talking about where are we going, what are we doing, how are we getting there, what resources do we need to get there.
But I can still do that selling me by the hour.
But when I can productize that, then I can, that's on the customer success side, right? And the product side, then I can leverage digital marketing because I'm going to be able to drive more leads and continue to keep those leads happy when I can productize it and build a team around us that is able to deliver.
So digital marketing has to be a core competency of your business. But before it can actually be successful, because it can be a core competency of your business, but if you're not great, and what's holding you back? It's because you're still selling time. You're still selling your image. And if you're still selling yourself, then the only way you're really going to ever be successful at marketing is through a one-to-one relationship. Now, I'm not saying there are many mega church pastors, self-help coaches, personal trainers, right? A lot of these people, let's face it, they're selling themselves. They're selling themselves, and therefore maybe there's a derivative of that. They're saying, I can make you better, I can make you skinny, I can make you this. But they are the image of the business. I don't think in the professional services business, if you're out there doing one-to-one or your posts, your social media, your digital marketing is really just focused on you, that's great. And maybe you're going to be successful. You're going to be able to occupy, and I'm saying occupy, 40 hours of your work week. But then what are you going to do after that? So you need to stop selling yourself, first and foremost. So get rid of the damn initials on your company tagline, right? Stop using your last names. It doesn't make sense. Maybe it does, but it really doesn't make sense. And I get it, but in some states you have to do that. It's the law, lawyers especially. But it just doesn't make sense. If you're trying to sell a product or a service, stop selling yourself. If you want to be successful in digital marketing, I think that's key number one. Productize.
You're going to be on the 23rd. You're going to be on the CPA.com webinar with Bloomer, and that whole piece is about how do you build the people side, the team, the service team, around FP&A, finance as a service, and I think that's super important because we'll go down there more next week. But in order to be successful in delivering against the digital marketing leads that are going to be pouring in your door in 6 months, you need to be able to deliver against them. Or the customers are going to come in, and they're going to go out just as fast on the other end because they're not going to be serviced. And it's that the traditional approach is, all right, I'm just going to hire a bunch of experienced people, whether they're CPAs, CFOs, finance execs, and I'm going to bring them in, and I'm just going to assign them out one-to-one to customers. And that's still, even though it's not selling your time, it's still selling time. And it keeps you limited in terms of the institutional knowledge, the learning you can have, and therefore the product. Because you're still not figuring out how do you productize that service. Your product is still people.
Yeah, because productizing is more than just slapping a price on a list of a bunch of services, right? So I can sell you something for $1,000 a month and say, here's what I'm going to do. That's still not productizing. Productizing has to go above and beyond that. It has to be prescribed. There has to be controls, workflow. And probably the most important thing, especially in human capital, because there's only 2 ways to make money in business, guys. You leverage capital or you leverage people. You got to be able to have leverage people as that third attribute of productizing.
Yeah.
Don't just put up a website and say, for $1,500 a month, I'm going to do this to your books, I'm going to do this to your plan, and that's it. Because you're not going to be able to scale the business. You're still selling yourself. So even if you are successful with digital marketing, your biggest bottleneck is going to be you.
Mm-hmm. So getting back to digital marketing, it does need to be a core competency. What are the, in our journey, what are the things that you feel that have been aha moments or pivotal moments in our journey as we've been through this?
the importance. So I always enjoyed the networking. I enjoyed bellying up to the bar, having a beer with a new potential customer. There are a lot of things I miss. I miss you and I going to meet a new customer. But I also realized, oh shit, I can't do this. I can't spend 3 hours of my day times 2 to go sit and have a cup of coffee or a beer with a potential lead for $2,500 a month. It's just not worth my time. My pivotal moment was when we actually acquired our first customer because of SEO. And I don't even know what the hell he was looking for. It was a keyword. He became a very good friend of ours, and we've visited him many times. And it was Zuda Yoga out in Sacramento, California. And I think this was still back in 2015, 16.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to us because he needed financial management, coaching, a little more financial rigor. And he found us on Google. And I turned to Chris, very straightforward. So how the hell did you find us? You're in Sacramento. And it was not just our first SEO customer, but it was out on the West Coast. We had customers out on the West Coast at the time, but it wasn't even I don't remember the last time we acquired a customer outside of the region, right? That we hadn't
Networked into. Yeah.
Networked into, thank you. That to me was pivotal because the rest of it is math, and you start thinking about the capital that's required to build a digital marketing team, the know-how, Google AdWords if you're doing that, copyright. But one thing we never did, and we never, until probably a year and a half ago, was, or probably 2.5 years ago now, was the importance of having an outbound sales strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at marketing here for a service-based business, it's not just putting out a bunch of posts on Facebook and everyone's excited because your mom, your sister, your best friends liking your stuff. That's not who you're trying to sell to. So it has to go beyond just a social media thing. And it has to be about inbound marketing, and that's all about content management, content creation. It's got to be about outbound sales. You have to have an outbound sales strategy. It is crazy how effective it is to pick up the phone. I get it. Over the last 5 years, nobody is like, where's the phone, right? There was a time here, I don't even know where the hell the phone was. But now we all know where the phone is. And then the third piece is, and this is a piece you don't start with, advertising, Google Ads, LinkedIn, retargeting. You don't start with that. And all too often, everyone starts with the latter. You need to start with the content. And you made this comment 2 weeks ago. Even if you don't have a business, just start creating the friggin' content. Fake it till you make it. Start creating that library.
Mm-hmm.
Pump it out there.
So that people know that you're serious about this, right?
And Google's going to realize oh shit, this guy is actually for real. And then you're going to start getting ranked. And then you're going to be more scientific, your approach. You're going to start doing keyword searches, analyzing your competition, and trying to grab onto those coattails for certain vendors or certain partners.
Yeah. What do you need to do as a CPA firm, consulting business in the accounting space to help build for the future?
Easy.
Help
Start
build
thinking
this.
like a marketer.
Think like a marketer, but I think one of the keys is you can hire some outside resources to help you learn it, but it needs to be in the DNA of the business. And it's not going to be there today, right? So maybe it's not DNA. It's got to be learned. But you need to make sure that you are dedicating... Mutated. That's right. You're the Delta
Listen,
variant.
if you can mutate a 46-year-old, you can mutate any CPA.
You need that internal capability, and you need to learn that, because otherwise no one is ever going to manage your marketing process to get to your goals. They can manage pieces of it, but you need to make sure that you are owning it. Think of your best customers. Sometimes we used to say on the bookkeeping side, the best customers are those that have done it for themselves for 6 months, 2 years, whatever it might be. They know what they want, and they're so much easier to work with, right? Because they know the pain, they value it, and now they're offloading it, right? Same thing here. You need to the best customers for a marketing business are the ones that know the owners, that know what they want. And so make that your goal. Figure out how to own and manage your marketing.
Yeah, I'm not saying that every business has to insource it, right? It has to have the internal. But at some level, you need some sort of institutional knowledge around how all of this works. You don't have to do it yourself, but you have to understand the processes, the systems, the piping. I think it's important.
How to make decisions.
You just have to, like, there's a part of your brain that just has to, like, acquire that and then offload it. Let other people do it. Either outsource it, build your own internal team. For us, it was important to build our own internal team.
So that we could figure out, how do you make decisions around marketing? That is the key thing, right? And we even have customers now. We are a finance as a service firm, but we've got customers that asked us to help them with marketing because they knew that we had gone through the process, gone through the journey, and they wanted to kind of replicate that. So it's a bit of teach them to fish, right? Teach them to market.
You know what's the best thing I heard this week? There was a lead. Obviously, he's not going to be a customer. There was a lead who turned to one of our team members and said, you guys aren't focused because you do accounting, you do planning, CFO, tax, and then there's this marketing thing. You're just not focused. You're not for me. Just like, lady, we're having a conversation with you because of our marketing team, not because of our bookkeeping team.
It was ironic, right? And look at our 10 steps to putting together a financial forecast. What is step number one? Like, is it revenue?
No, it's addressable marketing and customer acquisition.
So how are you going to get your customers? Because if you can't get your customers, you're not going to have a business.
So back to revops. You've got your marketing. Those are the 3 feeders into our marketing. And I know we're not consultants here around marketing. This is just our approach. It works for us, and we think it could work for you.
Mm-hmm.
We've got our 3 feeders: inbound, outbound, and advertising. And within those 3, you do have different strategies. Cold calling, cold email, and the outbound. Inbound, content, SEO, etc. Video, YouTube, Google AdWords, LinkedIn, retargeting. Now, taking all those leads, and this is where I think companies may fail with the Google AdWords, because there's nothing more exciting than to go onto SEMrush and see your sessions, unique visitors, users, however you want to look at your website, go from 0 to 100,000 in a matter of a month. The problem is, even if you convert 1% of that 100,000, who the hell is going to handle 1,000 contacts? Is it you? No, it's not going to be you.
And the worst thing is to see that first form submission sit there for a week because you didn't have the process in place to actually contact that person.
And that's happened to us. And I would say, I would actually argue, I bet you we've had contacts that were sitting out there for more than a week. And guess what? We paid for that contact. But we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the technology, the systems to capture and to follow through. Now we're using HubSpot.
Yeah, no, that was part of our process, right? Like, we had leads coming in and we didn't have the process in place, right? We caught that a week, 2 weeks later, be like, we need this process, right? So it was part of our learning journey, which I look back on it and we've learned a ton. But that's why we're here today talking about this. Is here's the system thinking that you need to have when you're looking at RevOps, because you can't just focus on one area and then
it's got to be the entire system, layered with technology, people, processes, and probably the last piece is data, capturing that data. And data needs to be complete. I mean, I'm like a broken record around here. When I go into HubSpot and I go into the CRM or the sales pipeline and I see broken data, I'm missing telephone numbers, missing last names, it's bad. It's got the integrity of the data for all of this to work. Otherwise, that data it doesn't create bottlenecks, but it just like gets stale and it essentially becomes a monkey and someone else's, it becomes your problem.
It's disinformation more than it is information.
And so as these new leads are coming in through your sales pipeline, you realize very quickly that Steven and I cannot be on the phone 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, with all of these leads. Because the problem is, as good of a job as you try to do on what we call internally here, self-selection, our goal in RevOps is to see leads actually leave, right? Because what we want are the best potential sales qualified opportunities to go through.
Definitely.
We have plenty of great content out there that you don't actually need to talk to us. It's already out there. To sit on a phone call for a half hour or an hour with a customer who's probably not in your sweet spot turns into a time suck.
Oh, total time suck. Yeah, from your marketing content all the way through, you want to be selecting people out of there so that when you are spending your most valuable resource, your time, talking to someone on a one-to-one basis, not a one-to-many, on a one-to-one basis, that you are talking to somebody that is already qualified. So as much as they can self-select out, that is like number one. And that's the feedback to marketing, right? I got 10 bad leads. Sure, I got 100 good ones, but is there a way I can get these 10 to not click on the form? Or is there a way I can change the language so that they are going in a different direction, getting what they need, the information they need from us, but not getting to the place where I'm spending time with them?
And then, so back to technology. And technology is great in RevOps. It really helps it bring it all together. But one of the downsides is automations. And when you have automations without that relation, or worse yet, you have automation that scrapes the bottom of the ocean floor, and all of a sudden, this has happened to us twice already in the last year. It was a CPA, a CPA colleague out in Ohio. He ended up catching one of our marketing outreach. Total by accident, it slipped through the cracks. And then more recently, we didn't know because it went to his Gmail. It ended up going to one of our existing customers' RevOps managers.
Which is kind of ironic, right?
It's kind of ironic, but it's one of the unfortunate sides of scaling your RevOps. You do lose a little bit of that one-to-one, like who are you? Let me research you. Let me spend an hour kind of figuring you out. Do I know anybody in common? You don't really have time for that when you're trying to grow your business exponentially. And then the last piece to this is once you do filter out marketing qualified leads, they become real marketing opportunities. That's when you and I will jump in to close the deal, if you will. But the deal doesn't actually get closed until pricing, proposal, and an engagement agreement. And so in our business, and I think in many other businesses this would also be applicable, on the technology side, it's Practice Ignition, and we've had them on the podcast.
Fantastic platform.
Fantastic. It's seamless, connects with our workflow, connects with our QuickBooks.
We've been using them for years, but I remember first getting pitched, or actually seeking them out, and we're like, no, I just can't take that extra expense right now. Not enough value. I'm still going to put it together in my Word document, right?
Yeah.
But can you imagine?
No. No, that was awful.
But it's built for the accounting world, so definitely check it out. Like, it was one of the tools that just makes RevOps so much easier, and that we've been using that before we ever started looking at thinking about it in terms of RevOps. But it does a fantastic job. But whether you're in or out of the accounting industry, totally, like, it is worth looking into.
I agree. And so that kind of puts a period at the end of this sentence, because after that, it is customer success, although in our business, customer success really starts when a contact, a lead, a potential customer becomes a sales qualified opportunity. That's when we really engage customer success, because really the conversion rate between SQO and a
closed
signed
deal
is quick, and it's tight, and there's a lot of certainty and confidence around closing that opportunity, that it just makes sense for us to preempt the whole closing of the executing of the engagement agreement to get customer success in. So that way, that is the period at the end of this sentence, and then you can always check out our conversations from back in May to talk about customer success, because that is something we've put a lot of time and effort, and we talk about, and we meet with customer success on a daily basis. Believe it or not, we actually meet with our FP&A team on a daily basis. We meet with our sales team on a daily basis, and lastly, our customer success team on a daily basis. So that's the level of emphasis, and those are the 3 meetings that you and I are on together only, outside of our management meeting once a week. And with that said, halfway through September, what are you looking forward to most in the next 2 weeks?
I'm looking forward to the changes that we are making that tie into our RevOps and customer success. Our team is growing. We've had the pipeline is filling back up, and we're changing our focus to be able to make sure that we're able to deliver against that, and making sure that those things go off without a hitch. Keeps me amped.
Good. I would agree with that. So, thank you, everyone, and see you next week.